how are we making sure our managers are trained to know how to lead a flexible work team? Because right now, only 44% of managers are getting any training at all globally, according to Gallup. So when you're leading a flexible work team, you need those skills. They don't have them, but let's say you give it to them. And let's say you give employees the skills to be really effective in how they're prioritizing what they're doing and where they're doing it, when they're doing it.
Cali, welcome to the Future Work Podcast. Gosh, it's really exciting. A 30-year veteran.
I know, right? With another veteran.
I know it.
That's so exciting for me. Thank you, Frank, for having me.
Fortunately, I'm the only one here with gray hair, so we'll go on for that.
Well, I
No,
may have some. So
you've been in the flexible workspace strategist for 30 years, for three
Mhm.
decades. Tell us, how do you get everyone in an organization on the same page about work, or even can you? Because I don't think they are right now.
They are absolutely not, Frank. And before we get started, I do want to put a plug in for the episode you just did with Nick Bloom. I think it's a great foundation for the conversation we're going to have today in terms of the data-driven business case for flexibility. So I urge everybody to go over there and get that data, and you'll see it's here. You benefit as a business, so we can put that to the side so I can get on with how do we make this work? Because to me, the next level question really is, how do we make flexible work models high performing? Okay. How do we reimagine the way work is done so that we can use that flexibility to fuel performance, engagement, innovation? And so part of that, or the main part of that, is getting everybody on the same page about where, when, and how work is done. And right now we are not, to your point. You talked to Nick, he told you data around the fact that you now are in our next round of mandates. And let's say you are mandated to come in 5 days, you're coming in on average 3 to 4. Let's say you're mandated to come in 2 to 3 days a week, you're maybe coming in 2. And the reason for that is people just don't know why they're there. You haven't gotten them, you haven't created a shared understanding for the need to be in person and what you're going to do then, and then what you're going to do when you're not in person. So you're not on the same page. It's inefficient.
Well, it's interesting. Years ago, um, and I'm talking 2 decades ago, we were working with a major global 500 company, high growth tech company, and we're doing a workplace study of the occupancy of the desks and their workstations within their corporate campus. It was only 42%.
Yep. We were not at full capacity before COVID at all. No,
Exactly. This is not a new thing.
this is not a new thing. You and I both know this, and I think the hard part right now is we seem to be grasping, right? Trying to get back to this traditional work model that we believed existed before COVID, and it didn't. And so that's holding us up from now stepping forward and saying, okay, let's now assess where we are. Let's admit we're not going back. So now how do we move forward? Because the model we have now in many cases was executed under a crisis circumstance, right? Like you and I would go in before COVID and do a thoughtful execution and be strategic. And there were leaders that saw this new flexible work reality happening.
Well, I actually think RTO, we actually jokingly refer to RTO as return to obedience,
Yeah, well,
not office. And I think a lot of companies, first, they've overinvested in facility relative to the way they should be used. They're trying to protect their investment. It's embarrassing when you've got 500,000 feet of space and you only needed 100,000. That's pretty silly to the board. Um, but also, a point you make about definitions.
yes.
Unless we understand the terms and are using the same terms, and the definitions have a certain basis in data, we won't ever be able to have the conversation that's necessary to accelerate. And you just said, how do we make um, flexible work productive or more,
High performing, like for everybody. Yeah.
and I'm going to say, wait, it's already outperforming other forms of work. So it's a matter of how do we recognize these things with uniform data sets,
Yep.
a uniform language and definitions overall, and how do we make it strategic instead of just tactical?
So I think it's performing, but I think it could perform better. Okay, so let's use the example that Nick shared with you of his study of that organization TripIt, where he did the randomized study where he just assigned birthdays, and the people who were on one birthday came in full time, and those with the even birthdays came in a hybrid. And the business outcome of that was you definitely got a benefit in that there was lower turnover for the people who worked hybrid. So that's the business case. There was no increase in productivity comparatively between the two groups. However, I would say if you executed that hybrid model in that study, which he couldn't do because he needed to do a randomized study,
Right.
but if that hybrid model had been executed in a way where those employees stepped back and said, okay, what are we going to do when we're in person? How are we going to really make the best of that time together? And then what are we going to do when we're not in person? How do we make sure our communication tools we are working effectively, coordinating across places and spaces? How are we making sure our managers are trained to know how to lead a flexible work team? Because right now, only 44% of managers are getting any training at all globally, according to Gallup. So when you're leading a flexible work team, you need those skills. They don't have them, but let's say you give it to them. And let's say you give employees the skills to be really effective in how they're prioritizing what they're doing and where they're doing it, when they're doing it. I'm going to promise you, Frank, you're going to get even more benefit from that process. So that's where I think it's where we have an opportunity. We already know it works, but what we're often working from is not a place of optimization. And that's the next stage.
It's interesting. I wonder, as you're saying that, if we're spending way too much time trying to train and retrain and hire and fire staff and relocate that around AI,
Yes, Frank.
not around flexibility, because
Yep,
we need both, but
yep,
the emphasis right now seems to be a panic about AI, or it's either a golden solution for everything, or it's the evil robots are going to take over the world. Blah blah blah. That's where all the conversation is. Maybe because people are investing in that, and
yes,
they're not investing in training and flexibility to strategically improve what they have and to not disrupt lives
yep,
so much. And maybe that's a
yes.
string that we should be out there, sermonizing more effectively as executives within the industry.
So you bring up a very good point, and I'm sure you've seen the recent studies that have shown. I think the McKinsey study showed that 80% of the Gen AI investments are not having any return, and we've spent $62 billion on those Gen AI investments in the past year. That's a lot of money to not have any return on. And then I think the MIT study found that 95% of experiments on AI are failing. So we're not doing that particularly well. And I would contend that we just need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of work, where it's happening, when it's happening, and how it's happening around AI, and collectively train employees and involve them in the process of thinking through, based on their work, where does that happen best, when does it happen best, and then how with AI and that holistic approach to that defining that work model will actually overcome a lot of this lack of being on the same page and the lack of productivity and performance that we're seeing.
Well, it's funny when you mention AI. We have a theory in our own company about AI, and we make AI instead of AI. We use lowercase.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the lowercase is distinctive to us because it means that we weave it inside of existing
Totally.
processes instead of try to replace people or processes entirely.
Exactly.
It becomes a much more of a seamless tool to use as opposed to a redirecting of everything. Now that may be not the right way to
Well,
go.
I think that's a really great example. I
Fire
think,
anybody. I haven't had
well,
to fire anybody, and everybody
exactly.
40% growth last year, and we added 2 people.
Yep, yep.
So it's like weaving it in instead of laying it on top and replacing, to me, seems to be, and we're kind of off topic a little bit, but it's a
No,
part.
it's all part of the whole because this is all about work. Okay. This ultimately becomes about the work model. and how, when, and where we're going to work. And AI is a component of this, but we're too siloed in how we're looking at all of these things. So we keep looking at where in one silo, we keep looking at when in another silo. I would argue time is another issue right now. There's a new study that just came out today. Robert Walters
Mhm.
backed up the Microsoft study around the infinite workday. I mean, there are no boundaries between when people are stopping, and that's burning them out, right? We're not on the same page about when. And then now the how with things like AI. So that's where all of these aspects of work have to come together as we think about the way we're going to move forward most effectively.
That brings up a really good point. Who should be making this decision
Oh, that's a
strategically within a company? How should this decision be made? Who should be making it? Because right now we have sort of, I don't know, I don't know, I won't say the blind leading the blind, but it ends up being a certain amount of that, uh,
yeah.
where a lot of experimentation and not a lot of thoughtful decision making that's long term and strategic. Says I get further if I go slower.
Exactly.
There's an old saying that says, s- uh, s- uh, slow is smooth and smooth
Yeah.
is fast.
Okay, Frank, if I could bottle that up and send that to every single senior leader right now, because I do think what's happening is there's just need to go threat. We just got to get this done. We just have to do it.
Yeah, it's almost like earnings. It's almost like earnings. This
Yeah.
quarter, this quarter,
Right,
this
sure.
quarter.
And in the end, to your point, it's gonna take longer. And so you asked me who should own this. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you what I've seen work the best, and I think is the best model. First and foremost, you have to have a senior business line leader sponsor it. Okay, it has to be somebody everybody respects, because that's the only way that any kind of an holistic rethinking of the work model is going to get the time, the money, and the space to be done correctly. And that's where that person has to be willing to hold the space and say, we are going to take the time to do this. And I am going to give you the resourcing. And we are going to give this the attention it requires in relation to all the other aspects of our work that are competing for attention. That person has to hold the space and be the sponsor. Then you have to get all these different functional areas together into a collective task force or ownership of the execution, and they have to come together and say, what piece of this do we have to lead? What piece do you have to lead? That's IT. We cannot keep giving IT the sole access to the keys to the innovation kingdom, which right now, in many cases, they are leading a lot of the innovation. And yes, they're going to lead with technology, but you have to have the people aspect. And then you have to have the space aspect, right, Frank? So you start to define the model, and at the same time, all these different elements are coming together.
Well, when you explain it that way, it sounds to me like this massive change management project. When really it's a matter of letting the flow flow. To me, I don't see it as massive a change as saying it's a natural evolution. Evolution, not revolution
Yeah,
approach.
it's how we think of change, okay? I think people think change has to be a massive thing, but if those key components are in place and there is just a general direction set where everybody's communicating with each other, the work is still getting done while the change is happening. So the way we do it is there would be a period of assessment. Okay, that takes some time where you're just seeing, where are we now? What's working now? What's not working now? Where do we want to go? So there is some aspect of a shared vision that's created. So to your point, we let it flow. Okay, we let it evolve toward that vision with intention. Then you are in that process aligning everybody to get on the same page about that vision. So you can't have everybody evolving in their own different way, because right now you've got some senior leaders who still have their construct for work as you're in the office. That has to shift. And then you have some employees who have never ever really been in an office, so they don't understand. So again, that's part of the process that has to be in place to get them on the same page. And then you have to train people in those competencies that I talked about. Like, you have to make sure managers know how to manage. You have to make sure employees know what their role and responsibilities are. And you and I have talked in the past about individuals having to take more responsibility in this flexible work reality, but they have to be told in many cases what that is. Like, what are the expectations for you? And then you have to experiment. And all of those things can happen in the context of the work still getting done, but there's an intentionality around thinking about the way we are actually executing this that people are experimenting with.
There's another element to bring up here that I think is important. When you talk about management, change, blah, 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 all these things coming together, we have to remember that there are 5 generations in the workplace.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
differences in a generation, I'll use myself, I'm active in the workplace. I would be at the baby boomer category. Um, I started off in business handwriting letters.
Hmm.
We started making copies with mimeograph machines.
Remember the smell, Frank?
The fax did not exist,
Yeah.
et cetera. Um, and yet we've migrated through all the changes in technology, certain of us. Others are native digital and they don't know anything but
Yep.
the way we think about change is radically different. So when we talk about, oh, wait, change and evolution and all these things, each generation within the workforce defines change and speed of change differently.
And that's why there has to be that intentional alignment, because what I've seen is when you bring all those different generations together, that's where the magic is. So all of a sudden, you have perhaps the more senior leader who gets the opportunity to explain to the more junior person, I get it. Like, you are productive in this area when you are working remotely, and I appreciate how you are doing your job. But you know what? It really matters for you to sit in a room with me and watch me communicate with a client. And so we are going to make that happen. Let's prioritize those things so that that helps with your development. And then I've seen the junior people say to those senior people, I get it that you don't love Slack. Okay. However, this is where a lot of our conversations are happening. So let me sit with you and help you understand how to use Slack so that we can all find ways to communicate with each other when we are operating across these different dimensions. So to me, it's bringing all those generations together intentionally as part of that change process that really does help move the organization forward.
Oh, by the way, I don't know anybody that likes Slack, but that's another story.
I know. Or I'll tell you what, they like it a little bit better than Teams, though. That's interesting.
Maybe,
I don't
maybe.
know. I don't
The
know.
document sharing isn't good. We could argue
I
about that.
know.
Hot desking, is that a realistic solution for, or is that disruptive to culture and comfort and things of that nature in the office? How do people think about the physicality of accomplishing this at their, I'll say, corporate headquarters
Yeah.
for remote home offices?
Hmm.
Um, how many people that work remotely on a part-time basis, let's say, and we'll call that hybrid, but not using a third workplace, actually have a proper ergonomic environment within which to work that's comparable? And I would say it's 10%, 20%, no
Yeah.
better.
Okay. So this goes back to this strategic aspect of,
I'm gonna go a step further. How many people in Gen Z don't have a roommate that's disruptive to a work environment?
yeah.
Um, uh,
Yeah.
how many people in the mid early millennials don't have kids running around,
Hmm.
etcetera? So all these things have to be taken into consideration when you're setting something up remote, and you or we as employers have to say, "I'm gonna send someone out to that remote workplace. I'm gonna make sure they have a good seating, good lighting, a proper workstation." That's how they earn, or we provide that to them, a proper environment. Because if you don't give people, I'll say, comfort tools, slouching on your couch with your laptop with a dog running back and forth is not a good work environment.
So this
Um,
is where you have to be strategic, okay? So this assumes you've defined your flexible work model. And this is why you said we talked about definitions. So one of the reasons hybrid is limiting is that hybrid infers there are two places that you're working. You're
3
working
places. You have to have 3
and you have to
places.
have three. And hybrid by definition is two. Okay. So a flexible work model expands the opportunities for where you are working. Okay. So you've been strategic as an organization and you have decided based on the work people have to get done they're going to do certain aspects of their work in the office, the home, let's say the headquarters. They're going to do a certain aspect of their work when they're remote, and maybe their third aspect, a certain aspect when they're in a third place. Okay, that's been defined as to what that work is going to look like. Then you come in and say, okay, so what spaces do we need to enable that model? And that will optimize what we're doing when we are in person in our headquarters. What does that space look like? Now, we've seen what's emerging is a greater awareness of the need for more collaborative spaces. And actually, interestingly, teams still kind of want their like neighborhood where they get to sit together, right?
Agreed.
Now, can that be put on the booking system and people can use that desk if somebody's not there? For sure. Okay. But there are times they may all be there, and that's their space. Now, in terms of remote, when you're strategic, you have defined, well, certain aspect percentage of your work is going to be in your home. So for that to happen, you have to have this kind of a setup. You have to have this kind of a desk, you have to have this kind of an environment, you have to have this kind of a chair. Some organizations will actually give you money to get that.
Mhm,
Okay?
mhm.
Now, if you don't have that, then there needs to be the next step, which is, okay, so where are you going to work if you're not coming into this office? And that's where it's very important to have places like that third space where that setup is there and people can access it, but they're not doing the long commute. So again, it's start with the strategy, and then all those different types of spaces begin to get a lot clearer about what's required.
Well, you know something else that's different. I just running through my mind here. We've done some work with disaster recovery and business
Hmm.
continuity. So think Hurricane Katrina,
Absolutely.
Hurricane Sandy, etc. And one of the things that we did for that is put together a sort of a business continuity insurance plan.
Hmm.
And it was kind of fun because we said, well, here's your corporate headquarters. It's at this spot, and there's 300 people that work there. Okay. Um, and if something happens, what are you going to do?
Yep.
So what we did is we drew a series of little circles around the corporate headquarters. The circles kept extending out and out and out. And within each of those circles, and we subdivided them into quarters, and then we looked at where people lived and said, well, all the people in this quadrant that's out 2, 3 circles, 4 circles, go to this place and
Hmm.
to this place, and these go to this one. And if you look at business continuity models,
Yep.
there's actually a lot of that can be learned when it comes to flexible workplace models. Uh,
Totally.
when you're figuring out this third workplace issue, because in a disaster, if there's no power or if there's disruption in bandwidth, telecommunications, etc., um, and you still need to get people together. And let's say, um, and this is not a good remote work situation, but you have a service call center, you're a bank,
Hmm.
and you're required by law to stay in business, or you're an
Yep.
insurance company, et cetera. There's a lot of study can be done about their disaster recovery programs to help us create these definitions because by law, certain types of companies, medical insurance companies, banks, et cetera, financial institutions, by law, they have to actually present a very
Yeah.
detailed business continuity plan.
Yep. And flexibility is part of that. The flexibility in where you're working and then the space you're
How you work,
using.
how
Yep.
you connect it, all of
Yep.
that. I think that the crossover in thinking maybe isn't 100%, but maybe it's
It's no, it's 100 because it is an application of a flexible work model. So there's all the, why are we doing this? What's the why?
but I don't think corporations are doing that. I don't think anyone's
No, no,
looking back
Frank.
and
Again, this goes back to silos, right, Frank? I mean, like nobody's like the risk management people are not talking to the people who are looking at workspaces, who are looking at technology. This is part of the whole. So, in that model I shared with you, where you've got all those functional areas around the same table talking about what aspects of this, you'd have the risk management people there saying, okay, so how does this apply to our business continuity model? And you're correct in that you would have my favorite story is at COVID. One of my clients email, this is the email I got from him. All it said in the subject line was seamless. That's all it said. Because they were able to quickly recalibrate overnight all their systems, where people were working, how they were working to be up and running the next day for business. Like they had no gap.
Mhm.
And so when you make business continuity, like you just said, part of your flexible work model, everybody understands, okay, regular business times, here's how, when, and where we're working. Something happens, this is what we're going to do. And they're able to make that switch. We had it recently with the New Jersey transit strike here. And I'll tell you, it was like I was living through Superstorm Sandy again, where people were lining up to try to get into the city in cars, and it was ridiculous. It must have taken people 4 hours to get into the city and 4 hours to get out, but they still were forced to do it. And I thought, then this is just dumb, because everybody could just know we have this happen. Everybody goes fully remote, and here's where you're going to work.
Well, it's funny you use the word seamless in the subject matter, which is kind of cute. I'm going to change that. Awareness.
Awareness.
All problems, all change. We have what we call a pebble in a pond theory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a pond is a certain size. It's got different shapes around the edges, different shallow and deep spots in it. And somewhere, a pebble is dropped.
Mm-hmm.
The wave pattern created by that pebble hits all those different sections of the pond differently. Someplace it goes smash, someplace it's just a tiny little ripple. So awareness of what's going on in the world, whether it's a weather report or a pre-pandemic, and I'll use ourselves as a good example. We had put everybody in our company that was going to go remote went
Mm-hmm.
remote in the pandemic in January of 2020.
Yep.
Okay, 3, 4 months ahead of everybody's. There's a problem here because we have offices in a variety of places around the world, and we listened.
Yeah.
There is a
Yep.
problem, and it's the pebble's been dropped in Asia, but the wave pattern is going to hit us. What do we do so that it is seamless? We had no problems. In 2021, we had 91%
Right.
growth.
So
And
here,
it actually was we functioned better
yeah,
as a result of it.
yeah. So,
Um,
but you have to link those strategic challenges with a flexible work model as a solution,
okay, well,
right?
that brings up strategically, and let's use big IT companies as an example.
Mhm.
In 2016, 17, they realized in their HR departments that they could not win the battle for talent
Mhm.
unless they had a flexible work program for particularly senior development engineers.
Mhm.
They couldn't win. They couldn't
Right.
hire. People would say, "Well, you wanna move me from my gorgeous home on my ranch, or my property in, Tennessee to Silicon Valley where I'd have to live in a condo,
Yeah.
and my family would have to go and it would cost more than my rent. No, I'm not doing that." And then somebody else says, "Well, why don't we just get you a virtual office or a co-working, facility office, a private office in Tennessee, and you just stay right there."
Mhm. But see what happens. What happens, Frank, is all of a sudden there's that accommodation, right? There's that exception to the work model. And then over time, what you see pre-COVID was people will say, well, why not me? Like, why not? And that then forces a more strategic review from the smart leaders, a more strategic review of the way they're working to allow for just flexibility in the day-to-day model. The interesting thing about IT, there's like a whole secondary shadow workforce in
Oh,
IT
oh,
that's like they're fully flexible. They work for agencies
yeah.
that so that's part of the pressure, right? Is this person will just say, well, I'll just stick with the agency and I can keep working in this flexible way. So labor markets have a great way of forcing this issue. And yes, with IT, that is indeed the case.
No, well, we've actually put a stop on our own, programmers and developers,
Mm,
and instead hire project managers and outsource.
yeah.
And we find that we accomplish more faster by doing that. Good project managers that can access on a flexible production teams
Yeah.
really has been a solution for us. But AI implementation. We chatted about AI, and we know that the impact it's already having in the workplace.
Yes.
Um, People are being laid off, and I think the biggest impact is what we're seeing in entry-level jobs. Gen Z
Mm,
graduates from college, can't find an entry-level job because 50% of the work that was done in that job last year is being done by AI this year. So the value proposition of the new hire is bad. So the experience that person gets, if they can get a job, which they can't right now, um, in I mean, there's just a massive problem with getting people into entry-level jobs. Can AI, the use of AI in the distributed workforce, help to mitigate that, help to recreate job opportunities for entry-level employees? Because if you don't have somebody maturing inside of a company or inside
exactly.
industry, um, you're never going to get the productivity that you want on a generational basis.
Totally agree. I think I'm not sure we're looking at jobs with young people correctly. I think, again, how are we paying for the AI? All right. And I think there has been a business case made to the CFO by technology people that certain percentage of productivity gains will be realized. And that is usually around hiring and cost savings from talent. And so I think young people were the sort of first place to go for that. But at the end of the day, you're kind of eating your seed corn. That's I grew up in
Exactly.
Pennsylvania and I'm like, "Nah." And so you're never going to get the domain expertise that is going to be required to actually optimize the AI. So I still think we're struggling with what AI is. And I don't think there's been a full embrace on the part of organizations that it's an augmentation. It is not a replacement in many cases. And so I hope we're going to turn a corner soon where there's going to be a recognition that we really have to hire young people and give them that domain expertise. But again, that goes back to it's not just about the AI. Then you've got to think about how you're developing these young people who will probably work across these different dimensions when they're in person, when they're not in person, and give them the skills and competencies to use that AI effectively. I just think the implementation overall with AI is just not working.
Yeah.
So
No,
there has to be a holistic reset on what we're doing there. And I hope hiring young people again will be part of that reset.
well, we have I won't say a rule, but a habit of we like to see 10% of all the people working inside of the company as being interns.
Yeah.
Uh, an intern for us means someone that's in their senior year of college.
Mhm.
And 60 to 70% of the interns that we hire end up becoming full time.
Yeah,
Okay. And because we're able to graduate them into the company, and that makes a big difference for us. And today, our 10-year plus managers, there are half a dozen of them or so, all started as interns.
how about that? And they have all that institutional knowledge and all that history.
And
And
they're incredibly productive technologically and with people skills and things of that nature, but it's because they live and breathe the culture or
Mhm.
the industry experience. If you're not the best student of the industry, you forget your own company of your
Yeah.
industry, then you can't bring enough to the table. Uh,
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think, again, this is going to have to be part of this, I think, a broader reset around AI and how much, not that we're not investing in it, but how much we're investing in it to the exclusion of people. And, I look, you have the little AI. I like to see when people put human first, human plus AI
yeah.
versus AI plus human. I get nervous when I see that. AI is not, it doesn't come first. It's really got to be the human aspect. And then how do we execute the AI?
Yeah, and the if you approach it that way, then you're humans, um, the meat, is really going to learn faster and more effectively how to utilize all the new elements in AI that are being developed today and will continue to be developed. It's just like
Absolutely.
any tool. We could go back to the Industrial Revolution and look at anything. It's the same thing. Or,
Absolutely.
as we look towards 2030, the magical what's going to happen in 20.
Yes.
This is my what's going to happen in 2030 question. The biggest problem, I think, in everything that we've discussed today really starts in the human resources department, having the right mindset of who to hire, how to
Yep.
hire, how they're going to work, etc. And that ultimately comes to companies winning the battle for talent. Without the brightest, cleverest, most energetic people, you can't be the
Yeah.
leading company in the world.
You
You
can't grow.
have to have those things.
Yeah.
So, what challenges do companies going to face as they try and break through that barrier, or as they try and sustain themselves to be to win the war for talent using AI, using flex work, using hybrid, remote, all the elements to it? How are
So
some going to stay on top? That's the big
So the
question.
first thing, Frank, is to realize our labor demographics are going to be radically changing by 2030. There is Derek Thompson, who I love, who just when moved over to Substack. He was at the Atlantic. He wrote a great piece yesterday that I was like, okay, he's saying this. Why we are not talking about the radically changing labor demographics that are coming every single day, he has no idea. I'm the same way. If you and I can give you a great report is by a group called Lightcast. It's called The Rising Storm. They talk about different industries and the coming labor demographic shortages that we're going to be facing, and it is extreme. And there's a line in that report I love because this is me, okay, is leaders who came into the workforce in the 70s and 80s need to understand that's not the workforce anymore. There is not this endless supply of talent that you can just draw upon as needed, who will have the skills that you need, and you don't have to worry. That's changing. In fact, I think Derek Thompson said next year is the year we're going to have more deaths than we have births, and so
Well,
and
yeah,
that
population growth or stagnation
yeah
is a thing, and I'll bridge that real fast. We just hired somebody remotely in Kenya,
yeah exactly.
area where population growth is not a problem.
That's exactly right.
We're finding lots of talent in East Africa right now.
Yep. But that's a remote work model. Okay, so that's a flexible work model that you are leveraging to access talent. And there's got to be structures and cultures in place for that model to be successful and that person to be successful. So when you don't realize that the labor market's different, you aren't going to be motivated to actually execute a model intentionally. All the things I said at the beginning. How do we make our flexible work models high performing? How do we what do we need to put in place so that people can work across places, spaces, and time effectively? And we first have to recognize the labor market is really different than it was. And I've seen HR people everywhere saying it's nearly impossible to find people with the skill sets that you want. So you do have to start training people. And then you said something with Nick that I think is important. You had the Randstad data that said when an organization puts out a job posting that has hybrid or remote in it, you get a
Right.
5 to 1,
Return.
5 to 1, right? And Nick quoted, people want to work 2 to 3 days a week remotely. You've got to give the talent what they want in order to be able to catch them. Now, right now, people are saying, oh, employers have the upper hand and living in that space is only going to keep you further behind in doing what you need to do to create the model that's going to get you the people that you want. And I'll say all the generations again, you're going to have people in the boomer Gen X category who want to keep working and have wonderful institutional knowledge but don't want to work coming into an office every day.
I
And then
don't.
no,
I
and you
don't. I,
yeah,
I haven't worked in an office permanently for 30 years.
right. And they'll stick around, but they need flexibility. And then you have the people in the middle who are going to be all the caregiving that's coming down the road, whether it's elder care, whether it's children. They are going to expect flexibility and want it. And that's men and women. Okay. I always love these studies that say women prefer flexibility. And then you look at it, it's like a 3% difference between men and women. Okay. Guys want it too. Okay. I stopped doing this through the women's initiative 15 years ago because all the men would get so mad. They're like, we would like, it's like, okay, this is not helping anybody. Okay. And then you have the young people who just are intuitively, this is how they work. Like they want to be in person, but they want it to be intentional and thoughtful, but then they want to also have the flexibility. So to win that labor market and then access talent like you did, Frank, in Kenya, you have to build the model and you have to recognize the talent pool is very different. And that's what I think where we have to start to be prepared for 2030.
I think that's the pebble in the pond issue,
Mhm.
overall.
And we need to talk about it every day, Frank.
You
And
know,
we're not.
Yeah. We'll pick this up again. No, I'm very grateful to you, Callie, for sharing your thoughts. You have a tremendous background with an unbelievable customer base or strategic group that you work with. So very much appreciative. And let's do this again.
I'd love it, Frank. And I love talking to somebody who's been in this space even longer than me because I think it's important that we remind everybody this is not new. This
No.
is not new. And all we're doing is it's accelerated. And now we have to do it even more intentionally. We're not going back to what you think you're going back to was not reality. And so now we have to move forward.
Well, we have a funny saying that just says every new generation thinks they invented
Yes.
peace and sex.
There you go. And,
And
and this.
they forget that they are standing on the shoulders of those that came before them. Uh,
Yeah.
and that is something we all have to recognize.
Hmm.
Allie, thank you.
Thank you, Frank. It was
Great
great.
time, and we'll look forward to it again.
Absolutely.
Take care.
If it's impacting the future of work, it's in the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space.